How's it going? This is Ken. Today we're going to talk about a subject that really puts you in danger, and that's hypothermia. This is a sore subject for me. I became aware of hypothermia and how dangerous it is when I was a young Marine, and one of my friends, we couldn't find him, and then we started looking for him and found him on the ground, passed out from hypothermia, and he had to be rushed to medical care. So ever since that time, I take it a little bit more seriously, I guess, than most people do. I've seen cases of hypothermia in Korea, which, Korea in the winter, you would say, okay, yeah, you could get hypothermia in South Korea up near the DMZ. That's not hard. I've also seen hypothermia cases in Southern California. And I've seen, believe it or not, I've seen hypothermia cases in the desert of Oman. Yeah, I said Oman. Okay, so the one thing that all of these things, except for one instance, all the other cases of hypothermia that I've been witness to had one thing in common. It started raining about noon, the sun went down, and then the temperature dropped about 20 degrees. And that's what happens. So you need to be extremely careful in times like those. Now, hypothermia is technically defined as any time your body temperature goes below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's not a lot. You can get hypothermia at any time, in any place. And I'm going to read some of the symptoms to you. I've got some notes here. I want to make sure I don't miss anything. So I'm going to read these to you. First and foremost, a person who has hypothermia is not aware of their condition. They begin shivering. They start to become clumsy. They're confused. In my personal experience, their lips get blue. Their speech becomes slurred, shallow breathing, weak pulse. Then they start to get drowsy. After drowsiness comes loss of consciousness, and if the person doesn't receive some type of medical attention, death follows after a loss of consciousness. So the reason I want to bring this up is because as preppers, you need to be prepared to take care of hypothermia. Now, you need to be able to recognize the fact that someone has hypothermia, and more importantly, you need to be able to recognize when you're beginning to suffer from hypothermia. You need to recognize the early signs. And the early sign, the most important one, especially if you're out alone, is shivering. If your body is shivering, it is trying to generate heat to heat your core up. So if you're wet and you're shivering, you need to stop, build a shelter, change clothes, and get warm. Okay, so we're going to talk about each one of those one at a time. Stop what you're doing. If you're shivering and you're wet, you need to understand that is a very first sign that you could be suffering from hypothermia. And if you ignore it, it's only going to get worse. You need to take care of yourself immediately. You have no time to be joking around or saying, oh, I'll take care of it later with hypothermia. Because once you're into the hypothermic effect, you become confused. You don't even think it's cold. You're just doing your normal thing, not realizing any longer how cold you actually are. So if you're shivering, especially if it's been raining, if you're shivering, then you need to stop and take care of your business. Now, building a shelter, you could actually put up a tarp. If you're out in the woods, out in the field by yourself, you could put up a tarp. But another way you can build a shelter is to take one of those heavy-duty survival blankets, the one that has full on the inside and like a seal-lined tarp on the opposite side. Sit down on the ground and cover yourself from your head all the way down to your bottom, where it's touching the ground. If you don't have an opportunity to build a shelter to get out of the rain or to cover yourself, the least you can do is cover yourself with an emergency blanket, the heavy duty type. If you don't have one, I suggest you buy one because you're going to need it. Now, I'm going to show you an item you can keep in your pack, high speed, low drag, that'll help you survive a hypothermic event. You ready? It's a candle. So, back in the day when there were lone hunters and mountain men, they would keep candles in their kit. And the reason they kept candles in their kit was to keep them warm. Not only to provide light, but to keep them warm. So, during a storm and they were getting wet, they would take a blanket, a wool blanket, cover up with it, as I just described. You sit down on the ground, cover yourself with the wool blanket, and then they would sit and put the candle between their legs and light it. And the warmth from the candle would keep them from going hypothermic, the warmth from the flame. Okay, so push comes to shove, that's what you can do. Keep a candle in your pack. So if you feel yourself shivering and you don't have the opportunity to actually build a shelter and you don't want to build a fire, you can warm yourself, you can wrap yourself up in your survival blanket, put it over your head, let it drape down. Then on the inside where you are, you light this candle. And that will help warm you up. Okay, so there you go. You can also start fires with this candle. Now this isn't exactly like the candle I have in my pack, but I do have a candle. And you can light fires with a candle. Especially if you do not have some type of chemical fire starter and everything around you is wet, a candle will assist you in getting a fire started. All right, that's enough of that. So what you also need to do is change clothes. Now, I hear a lot of people talk about how you shouldn't keep your snivel gear or your warm weather stuff, your warm weather clothing, in your pack during the summer. I completely disagree. You need some type of snivel gear in your pack all of the time. Now, I know this may not be popular, but I'm going to tell you this once again. I've seen people going hypothermic in the desert in Oman. It started raining about lunchtime. It rained all day. And even though it was warm outside, when the sun went down and the temperature dropped 20 degrees, they started shivering because their gear had not arrived yet. So all they had was the clothes on their back, and they were soaking wet. So when the sun went down and the temperature dropped 20 degrees, they started shivering. And we had to act quickly. So you do need a change of clothes in your pack. And you do need to keep some type of snivel gear in there. What I keep in my pack is a watch hat, or some people call it a toboggan. I also keep a fleece vest in my pack. So if it started raining, I could put up a tarp, then at least get out of my wet shirt, put on a dry shirt, a fleece vest, and a watch hat to help warm myself up. And if I needed more after that, I could light the candle under my tarp and use my heavy-duty emergency blanket as a reflector to keep all the heat inside to warm me up. So I'm going to tell you, hypothermia is not something you want to mess around with. And if you believe that the only time you can get hypothermia is if it's really, really cold outside, then you are 100% mistaken. You can get hypothermia in the desert, 75 degrees at lunchtime. It starts raining, you get wet, no big deal. It's nice and warm until the sun goes down and the temperature drops into the 50s. If you don't have a change of clothes, if you don't have something to keep you warm, you're going to be in trouble. You're going to be in trouble. So what I'm going to suggest that you do is make sure you have some snivel gear, at least a watch cap and maybe a scarf in your bag. Even though it's summertime, you still need it. You keep at least a shirt in there so you can change your shirt if you get soaking wet. You have a survival blanket, a heavy-duty survival blanket, and you add a candle, because you can get hypothermia very easily. And if you're alone out in the woods and you get hypothermia and you cannot get dry and warm, your chances of surviving is really, really small. Really, really small. As I was saying earlier, we were lucky that we found my friend because he was passed out. His breathing was very slow and shallow. His heart rate was very, very slow. Pulse was very low. We were lucky we found him when we did. If we hadn't, he would have died, just laying there. So please take care of yourself. Do not ignore hypothermia. Do not believe that just because it's spring or it's fall outside that you're safe from being cold. You're not. You need to take care of yourself out there. So please consider what hypothermia is, what it does to your body, and how to prevent it. I hope you have a blessed day.